Hey everybody, Greg Pruitt here with the Idaho Dispatch. It is February 15th, 2022. And for those that did not hear the news the other day, we had actually posted, somebody sent us an Instagram post by Glenn Beck. And on that Instagram post, Glenn had said that he was coming to Idaho to meet with, I believe in the post he said Governor Little and then House and Senate leadership. And so we were trying to figure out if we could get in there and kind of cover it a little bit, and because I got to drive from Southeast Idaho up to Boise if I'm going to cover the event, and anyway, so I wasn't able to. I did some. I think Representative Tammy Nichols had live streamed it, so we did kind of review what Glenn had talked about in there, and wanted to talk to one of the legislators about what Glenn Beck talked about in their meeting. And so with me on the phone, and hopefully you guys can hear her okay, is State Senator Christy Zito. How are you today, Senator?
I am good, Greg. How are you?
I'm doing really good. So, I guess I don't know. We don't see a lot of celebrities, so to speak, that visit Idaho and then go to the Capitol and try to talk to legislators about political stuff, right? I think that's fairly rare in the 10 years that I've kind of been involved in Idaho politics. I'm not sure that that's ever really happened with someone, I guess, as big of a name as Glenn Beck. So what was that like today?
Well, it was really good to be in his presence and watch him. I do have to say that being right there in the room, he's just as dynamic when you watch his podcasts or watch his stuff on the Blaze. I was very impressed. He came across as very genuine. And, Idaho is important to him because he owns property in eastern Idaho. And I wouldn't be surprised if at some point, depending on how things go in our state here in the next little while, if he didn't resettle here in Idaho on the land he owns on your side of the state.
Okay. All right. For those just tuning in, we have State Senator Christy Zito on the phone talking about Glenn Beck's visit to the Capitol. And it looked like he talked for about a half an hour or so. Would you say that's accurate?
I would say that's accurate. He was on a pretty tight schedule. I'm not sure what time he got there, but it was my understanding that he was going to meet with the governor and with leadership, like the speaker and such. I don't know. I haven't heard anything about those meetings yet. So
Okay.
we were in the education committee room on the House side, and that's where he came and spoke to us legislators.
Okay. Yeah, because I didn't see. I'm looking at a group picture here, and I don't see Little or Governor Little or Senate Pro Tem Winder or Speaker Bedke in this picture. But from what I understand, there may have been a meeting prior to Glenn Beck meeting with all the rest of you in which room was this in?
The education committee room on the House side.
On the House side. Okay. Okay. Interesting. And so I don't know, looks like a couple dozen legislators were in attendance. And I also saw from the video, he's kind of famous, I guess, for using a chalkboard or a or a whiteboard when he's giving presentations or talking about political topics and stuff. So he did have one of those, and he couldn't really read what was on it. But can you kind of, I guess, give a brief rundown of the topics that he covered during the meeting?
Okay, I can do that. He didn't actually write on the board. The board was already written on when
okay.
got there because he was in such a time crunch. It's important to note that David Barton was there with him as well.
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, wall builders, both, very astute, very knowledgeable. They study what's happening in our country based on fact and documentation, not just conspiracy theory and conjecture. The big thing I believe, and I'm not quoting Glenn Beck. This will be what I believe that I got from what I heard him say today. I believe that Glenn Beck was here today to warn our legislature and to ask them and leadership to do something about the ESG score. the ESG score will be the end of the republic as we know it, and it will move us into a form of government that I don't think really any of us want to be. And this is going to be accomplished through public-private partnerships. And we hear that all the time. And we talk about, since I've been in the legislature, there's a word that I personally have just learned to just cringe when I hear it, and that's the word stakeholders. Because a stakeholder, I see all these people come into committees and stuff, and they talk about stakeholders. Well, a stakeholder can have something to do with it, but that doesn't mean that it necessarily directly affects their life.
Okay.
And so we're moving into a stakeholder form of government. But this ESG score.
So, sorry, Senator, can I? Yeah, I was going to say, can you briefly just explain what ESG stands for, and then I think you were about to go into what kind of an overall a description of what an ESG score is, if you can kind of do both of those things for us.
Right. Okay. Yes, the ESG stands for environment, social, and government. And so what the ESG score is businesses and people will be rated according to these three standards. Environment would be like if you're a green company and your company is doing enough to get a green rating, and then you will also be scored, and this affects individuals as well, on other businesses that you do business with that may or may not have a good ESG score, a good environmental score. The second one is social. And we hear so much now about the social emotional thing and your social standing. And then the last one, of course, is government and how you're going to interact with the government. And so you will be given a score based on this social, emotional, and environment, social, and government. And then that will determine to a great extent whether you can get a loan at the bank, possibly where you'll be able to shop, what you'll be able to do. And we say, well, I'll just live outside of that, because we've seen the credit score and we've all kind of been conditioned to really get all twisted up about how great our credit score is. And I believe that was just conditioning to move us into this. And Glenn pointed out very strongly that because of the business climate, and because this is already integrated into businesses, and he pointed out that if you have a Merrill Lynch account, you can go to the Merrill Lynch website and see what your ESG score is right now. And so I did a quick search where I got back to my office, and there are a lot of financial institutions now that's the first thing that comes up on their homepage on their website is about the environmental, social, government score. So what it would do is, let's say, for instance, you want to put in an oil pipeline, or you're a company that drills in gas and oil, or you have a trucking company that hauls water off of wells in Colorado or North Dakota. Because you're in the fossil fuel industry, and the fossil fuel industry is considered a bad thing now, you would have a low environmental part of your ESG score.
Okay.
And so, we look at their plans, and one thing that Glenn said, that another thing that I really respect, is he said, just look at the facts. You don't have to put any conspiracy theory into this or not. Just look at the facts, because they're terrifying enough as it is. So he used the example of, I believe it's by 2030, they're saying that you will not be able to purchase a new vehicle with a combustion engine in it, that everything will be over to some form of green energy. And you think, well, how can you do that? We are used to living in a society where supply and demand. So if everybody wanted to drive a pickup with a diesel engine, the market would respond and build pickups with diesel engines. Or if everyone wanted a 4-door car, the market would respond accordingly to the demand. But the world that we're moving into now, that demand won't have anything to do with it, because if you don't have a good ESG score, you will not get borrowed money to buy the vehicle that you want. The companies that are producing this equipment will not be able to get a loan from the bank to be able to produce what it is they want to produce and manufacture. So our whole entire, I hate to say, I'm not exactly sure what word to put in here. I hate to use the word existence because that sounds pretty harsh. But so many of the decisions that we will make that will affect our everyday life will be based on the control that this ESG score has over the purchases that we make. And Glenn's purpose here today was he practically begged the legislature to work together to pass legislation to stop the ESG control of us. There are some other states that have written good legislation, and he's going to work with Glenn and David Barton. They've worked with legislatures in other states across the country, and they're more than willing to work with us because they feel like Idaho could be the state. You know, we have that potential to be the state that would stop this in its tracks, stop it here in Idaho, and that you know would give courage to the rest of the country.
Okay, so I do want to go two things real quick. Number one, for everybody watching, so I went to Merrill Lynch, their website, and looked at solutions and impact investing. It does say companies that incorporate environmental, social, and governance factors into their decision making have the potential to deliver competitive returns over the long term. Sustainable and impact investments at Merrill undergo assessments by our CIO for the quality and competitiveness of the investment strategy, as well as analysis of the intentionality and depth of environmental, social, and governance integration. So that does look like it does on their website. They talk about ESG. So what you talked about, and yeah, there's just a bunch of it in here, and I can throw this in the description so people can read it. But what is the solution, I guess, from a legislative standpoint? And I from what I heard in the video, I think Representative Ehart had said that there was something being drafted. But do you have any idea kind of what type of legislation would come forward to block ESG scores, or kind of what's the discussion about?
Well, that was kind of brought up at the very end, and Glenn had a plane to catch, so he didn't get to go into a lot of detail about that. But it seems like I remember them saying that our government contracts with these different businesses and lending institutions, that state funds and state money would not go to businesses and institutions that instituted the ESG score.
Okay.
That was kind of the gist that I got from it. And I think, I don't know if I said it, but if I mentioned it, but when he said, listen to what they say and believe it, because sometimes this stuff is just so far out of our paradigm and our sense of reason in our mind that we can't grasp it. That if we just listen to what they're saying, if we listen to the World Economic Forum, and he mentioned them several times, and then look at the facts and look at what is happening, just like you said, you went to Merrill Lynch and there it is. If you just do a Google search, there are hundreds of sites that come up from lending institutions and businesses and such. And even if you'll notice on Amazon now, when you go to a product that you think you might want to buy, there will be a little badge by it that will say something like environmentally friendly or environmentally sound. So
Okay.
those companies are already bucking for a good ESG score.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to. Amazon's got lots of stuff on here, so I can't really look at that very easily. But I did look up Wells Fargo, for instance. They've got stuff about ESG on there. So, what is the, what is the, I guess, the common thing, or the regular people? What did he say that regular people are supposed to do? Other than, I guess, waiting for their government to do something or whatever. What did he say, or did he say anything in particular about what citizens should do to, I don't know if I want to say stop this, or not let the system go forward? What was his suggestions?
Well, I think his focus was mainly on the legislature getting something done.
Okay.
To stop worrying about party, to stop worrying about the politics of personality, that this is something greater than each and every one of us in the room. That was my takeaway. He didn't really address, because really, Greg, when it comes right down to it, and this score and these private public partnerships control your finances. If you can't get your money out of the bank, if we go to a cashless society, and if you don't have a good enough ESG score, and even if it's not your score, if it's the score of the businesses that you do business with, let's say that your local grocery store where you go every week and buy your groceries doesn't have a good ESG score, and you have a Wells Fargo credit card, Wells Fargo won't honor that credit card. Or let's say if you want to go to Cabela's and buy a gun, because the ESG score on gun manufacturers isn't appropriate, and you want to use your credit card or whatever to process that payment for that gun, Wells Fargo Bank or US Bank or wherever you bank, doesn't accept that vendor because their ESG score isn't high enough. So the reality of the thing is that every purchase that you make, from your vehicle to your groceries, possibly even the dentist and the doctor that you go to, going for hospital services, everything that you do in your life that has to do with your finances, and that's everything, can be controlled through that score by the institutions that handle our money.
Okay. So I know in doing research about some of this stuff prior to our interview, it looked like one of the suggestions from Glenn Beck and some others talking about this was to move your money out of big banks and go to local credit unions. Are they? I mean, the government doesn't have the ability to control that, or what?
The other night I did listen to one of Glenn Beck's programs about the ESG score, and he did say go to, move what you had into these smaller, more local banks. But that being said, I'm not exactly sure how the clearinghouse works, like for the credit card charges and the debit card use and stuff like that. I don't know if it's still that way, but there was a time when these smaller banks used the clearinghouses of the bigger institutions for those debit card and credit card charges. And I'm not 100% sure if it's still that way, but he did indicate on that podcast that I listened to the other night that right now that would be a smart move.
Okay, interesting. So what do you say to people who say this is, private companies can do whatever they want, and it's just a giant conspiracy. There's nothing to worry about. It's people who get together at the World Economic Forum and want to, just make sure the environment's protected and that social justice is implemented, have better government. What do you say to those folks?
Well, I would say just exactly what Glenn Beck said today. Listen to what they say. When the President of the United States stands in front of the people and he said, I forget what year, 2030 or 2040 or something, you won't own anything and you will be happy. They always tell us what they're going to do. They always tell us what their plans are. If you think back into the 80s when Bush the first, and I actually listened to this at the time, and he said, we're working towards a one world government. We're working towards this global unity. And I remember being a young mom, and that was so far out of my thought process that I'm sitting here thinking, what is he talking about? Well, now here 40 years later, here we are. And you can think that it's a conspiracy theory, but there's no conspiracy about it, because they tell us exactly what they're going to do, and then they do it. And they're patient, and it may take them years. But I will guarantee you what we've seen in the last 2 years since the COVID thing started, things have moved at warp speed. When I did a newsletter in March or April of 2020, I had done some research and found some information about the COVID passport and about the vaccines and stuff. And I put it in a newsletter. And I think a lot of people thought, that I was maybe wacky or that I was wearing a tinfoil hat. But no, all of this stuff is happening. and it's happening right before our eyes. And we have to put our normalcy bias aside and accept the fact that this is where we're headed. And as a legislature in the state of Idaho, I don't care about your politics. I don't care about your personality. I feel a duty and a responsibility that every person in that legislature that has a vote, and every influencer, including the governor, we need to put it all aside, and we need to take whatever steps are absolutely necessary to ensure that we can insulate and protect the citizens of this state from this stuff that's coming, because it's real and it's happening.
Okay, so if the legislation, let's say that one of the things that you had mentioned was, and for those just tuning in, we're on the phone with State Senator Christy Zito, a Republican from Hammett, who was in the meeting today with Glenn Beck talking about the World Economic Forum, and also David Barton was there. Did David Barton speak, by the way?
He did. He spoke for about 10 minutes at the beginning.
Okay. So David Barton was there, Glenn Beck was there, and a couple dozen legislators, it looks like. But he talked about the World Economic Forum. He talked about ESG scores. Let's say you get legislation passed that stopped companies in Idaho who have some sort of government subsidy or get government help in any way that it prevents them from using ESG scores. What else? I mean, is that the end of the concern from Glenn Beck and those that are concerned with the ESG scores, or is there more to do than that? Did he talk about that?
I didn't talk about that because his time was so short that his message was very, very focused.
Sure.
But even this spills over into every business. They even mentioned like ranches, because his property in Idaho is a ranch. And we discussed this earlier this year, that they want to put a tax on every head of livestock that you have. I think it was I can't even remember now, like a $600 tax a year on every cow that you have, because cow belches add to methane and they're not good for the environment and such. So every aspect of your life is going to be touched by this, no matter what industry you're in. And we need to do legislation to protect that. We need to protect our farms and ranches from some sort of a tax like that. We need to protect our gun owners from a tax. We need to protect our citizens so that they can choose the kind of vehicle that they want to drive. We need to watch these private-public partnerships that we're seeing move into our child care. I was in the department. I'm on the Health and Welfare Committee in the Senate. And yesterday, the director of the Department of Health and Welfare came and did a presentation on the CARES money and the ARPA money and all of this stuff that came in. And 3 huge chunks of money that are coming into our state have to do with making sure that parents stay in the workforce. Now, I don't care if you want to be a working parent. That's fine. That's your choice. But it should also be so that if you want to stay home and be a mom, you should be able to do that. But we see this huge government push for being involved in our families' lives from the moment those babies are born until possibly we die. And it's like this whole entire thing also is geared toward the degradation of the family unit. And that's the basic unit of society. And we have to so protect that. There's nothing more noble than to be a parent or to be a mom. And somebody's got to pay to take care of those kids, whether it's a mom staying home or whether you put them in someone else's care. And I think it's important that we keep that in mind as well, that, taking care of the ESG score is huge, absolutely huge. But I personally don't believe the work would end there. And Glenn's time was so limited that I don't believe he could go into anything more than he did.
Sure. Okay. All right, Senator Zito. Well, we appreciate your time. I know you've got to get running, but yeah, we appreciate your time and kind of letting us know what was talked about today. And we appreciate you coming on, and would be happy to have you on in the future.
Well, I'm available anytime. You just let me know. It's my pleasure. And just God bless you all, and God bless our country, and hold us and our world. This is not just Idaho. It's not the United States. This is the entire world. And I just pray that God holds us in his hand and gives us the strength and the courage to do the things that we need to do to preserve it for future generations.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time, Senator Zito. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Good night.
All right, everybody. Well, we appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope you had a chance. For those that didn't, be sure to go back and watch the rest of the interview. Be sure to give us a thumbs up here on the Idaho Dispatch channel, both YouTube. It's not up on Rumble yet. We'll get it up on Rumble for those that want to watch it on Rumble. We appreciate your guys' time and hope you enjoyed the interview. And we will try to see if we can't track down a good quality video. The quality videos we've seen so far weren't good for some of the streams that we saw. So if we find a good quality video, we'll also try to get that out to you guys. And then also be sure to subscribe to the Idaho Dispatch at idahodispatch.com/subscribe. Support independent journalism. We are doing our best to bring you guys the best political news in Idaho without all the bias, without all the agenda-driven garbage that you get out there, and just try to give you guys the news as you would want it. So thank you for tuning in. We appreciate your time. Take care and God bless.